We saw a Broncos defense at full strength on Tuesday at Broncos practice because we saw Dre Greenlaw out there in team periods next to Alex Singleton. And of course, we saw Nick Bonito as well. But we haven't seen much of Dre Greenlaw next to Alex Singleton. The regular season is coming soon. Will they have enough time to get the cohesion and chemistry they need, both them and the defense as a whole, to be ready for what comes in the regular season? I'll dive into that and more on this edition of Denver Football After Dark. Took a little bit there to get the slide up. That's what happens when you self-produce the show. But it is Denver Football After Dark here on this Wednesday morning, overnight. And it was a good day for the Broncos on Tuesday because they did see those two guys pictured there, Dre Greenlaw and Nick Bonito, practicing. And practicing with the full team, which is a great sign. Nick Bonito coming off of a surgery to remove a bone spur from his foot, and Dre Greenlaw having dealt with a quad injury, his second quad injury of the last 4 months, because of course he missed time with a quad injury that he incurred back in April that caused him to miss time in minicamp and OTAs. But now we're getting close to the regular season, and so it's worth asking. It's for Dre Greenlaw in particular, because you know Nick Bonito's going to be in good shape. It's just a matter of kind of getting his, pardon the pun, feet back under him. But for Dre Greenlaw, can he get that timing with Alex Singleton? That's a big question. As we turn the music down here on this Wednesday morning. For inside linebackers, of course, cohesion, chemistry, communication, the kind of the 3 C's, they're crucial. And you think back to when, for example, Alex Singleton was here working with Josie Jewell, and one of the things that the two of them had going for each other when they were together was a communication that actually went beyond verbal to where it was just signals and even kind of looks that they had pre-snap. And the two of them were on the same page, and you think back to that 2022 Broncos defense that for most of the season really held up more than its end of the bargain despite an offense that was objectively terrible. And two of the bigger reasons why it was able to do that were Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell, and two of the reasons why they flourished was because they did have that connection together, so it does matter. And Singleton and Greenlaw, they sit next to each other in the meeting room, and it was something Alex Singleton pointed out back in June is how well they were communicating and how much they were getting to know each other in those meetings. And certainly that helps, but it can only go but so far. You've got to have the time together on the field. They were getting walkthrough time, of course, but not so much actual on-field time. And they were counting on that happening in training camp. And then, of course, you have Alex Singleton has the fractured thumb, and he misses some time. And then Dre Greenlaw pulls up when he's covering J.K. Dobbins in one-on-one, and he misses some time. And only now are we seeing Dre Greenlaw back to team period work. He had the injury on July 31, and so here we are. It wasn't until August 19th that he's actually back to team period work. So it's nearly 3 weeks that he lost. Nearly 3 weeks, 2 preseason games, although he probably would have only played, he and Singleton together would have probably only played 1 because, of course, Payton rested most of the starters last Saturday. So you missed 2 joint practices of a chance to work together, and you missed a preseason game against San Francisco. And of course, Singleton also didn't play the preseason game against San Francisco. So you've really cut into the amount of time that Singleton and Greenlaw have had on the field together to kind of get that cohesion down. So I thought it was a fair question to ask Sean Payton at his press conference, what about kind of the need for game reps to kind of get that communication down, game speed? Because he's talked a lot about, the necessity of preseason game reps, whether it's, tackling to the ground or just getting things at full speed. And there's a reason why that even though he didn't want to play most of his starters last Saturday against the Cardinals because they'd had the 2 joint practices against 2 different teams in short succession, he still wants to get a lot of those starters game work, which is why you're going to see Bo Nix and plenty of starters for 8 to 10 plays this coming Saturday in New Orleans. He just wanted to have that work come later, to come a bit removed from the second wave of joint practices. So that's why I did ask Sean Payton about, the value of, not the value, but the necessity of those game time reps for Greenlaw and Singleton get together to get that cohesion down. And here's the coach's response.
Well, I think all these snaps, they all factor, when they're out on the field together. And so we got this week, we got Saturday, and then obviously a few days next week, then we're leading into the game, and then there's going to be that growth at the start of the season. But I do think it's a good question, and I'd be curious to hear their response.
Got the good question in there. Sometimes the good question means that he's sort of curious what the answer is going to be himself, because he wants to know what maybe they think, like that. He sort of wants to know what they think the value is going to be. And then he also talked about it going into the regular season. So that there's another thing there to go back to what is often said about the race to get better as you get through those first 4 games. And so this is something where it's probably not going to be all the way there when you get to week 1 against Tennessee. Probably not all the way there in the second game in Indianapolis. Then maybe you're not going to be looking at it being completely there until 3rd game Chargers, 4th game Bengals. And that's assuming that, you get all the reps and everybody's healthy. And that's where you start knocking on every surface you can find, because with Dre Greenlaw, you are talking about a guy who's coming off of an Achilles injury that even last year, as he worked his way back, he got limited snaps. So he worked his way all the way back, but then had to quickly go back to the bench. And now he's had 2 quad issues in the last 4 months. So I think there's reason for concern. As I responded to someone on social media today, I think you're probably in trust but verify mode. And it's okay. And I think if people are a bit skeptical about the state of Dre Greenlaw and his health, I think that's fair until proven otherwise. I think that is a fair perspective for people to have, a little bit of concern / skepticism until you see a bunch of games where he stays healthy. It's nothing personal. It's just when you see how much time he's missed, and then you see 2 soft tissue quad issues in the last few months, and you know how things can recur. And yes, we do know the Broncos were careful. That's a reason why he was out for 18 days in terms of not seeing team period reps until Tuesday. They took every precaution, and it's what they should have done to be extra cautious. But now the flip side of that caution is that they did have to cut into the reps that he would have gotten with Alex Singleton, because they basically cut into the reps in the team periods that he would have gotten last week once Singleton returned. And so now you are kind of fighting from behind and you are playing catch up here. And that probably will have something of an effect going into the regular season. How much of an effect? As our old friend Gary Kubiak would say, we're fixing to find out. So that's the question. How quickly can this defense get up to speed, and particularly there in the core with Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw, because that's really an area where you are counting on a big upgrade. Because last year, especially down the stretch, when you look at how the Broncos were getting gashed when those runs got to the second level down the stretch, especially you think of the Colts game, the Chargers game, the Bills game in the playoffs, this is where you were counting on some improvement. And then you go to last week when the Broncos didn't have Dre Greenlaw, and certainly some of this was on the safeties as well, and all the tiers of safeties, because Trey McBride was making plays against backup safeties as well. But you didn't have things at full strength going against Trey McBride, who admittedly is better than almost any tight end you're going to see in the regular season, but still maybe a reminder of how when you do face some of those top shelf tight ends, the Broncos coverage-wise are going to have to kick things up a notch. And yeah, you're going to face some top shelf tight ends, right? I mean, you're going to face Travis Kelce twice. You're going to face Dallas Goedert in week 5 when you take on Philadelphia. He's one of the premier tight ends in the league. He's become that way. You've got kind of a wild card there in week 2 in Tyler Warren, who's a rookie and certainly has is going to have rookie moments, but has certainly a lot of attributes that should make him effective, even though the savviness may not yet be there for someone who's a rookie. But there were reasons why a lot of teams liked him, and it would have been interesting to see what the Broncos might have done if Tyler Warren had slipped maybe 2 or 3 more picks, even though I think it was obvious he wasn't getting past the Colts. But if he somehow had gotten past the Colts and had dropped 2 or 3 more picks, you wonder what the Broncos might have done draft-wise, because Warren was a guy that they interviewed, and certainly even though they signed Evan Engram, they were still looking very heavily at the tight end position all the way up to the draft. So, but they're going to see some outstanding tight ends as they go through the season, and they're going to have to be ready for that. And you hope that at full strength they're going to be able to handle those guys. So, Denver football after dark here on this Wednesday morning. Kind of haven't really done as much on the defense as I'd like. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to lead off this show talking about Greenlaw and Nick Bonito being back, because to me those were kind of the top line things that came out of Tuesday. Those struck me as the most interesting things, and I think that was sort of a reason why I asked Sean Payton about the communication between Greenlaw and Singleton and sort of what's been lost and how much they have to catch up, because I think that's sort of an under the surface issue that might kind of bubble up, because I mean, I've heard this from so many inside linebackers over the years about how important that pre-snap communication and that cohesion between those inside backers is, that those two always have to be on the same page. They're one's kind of looking out for the other. It's almost like you have 2 sets of eyes, but those 2 sets of eyes have to be kind of connected and seeing things together almost. They have to be in concert. And when you don't have that, thing, if it's almost like you don't have that and the center doesn't hold and things sort of fall apart from there. And so it's one of the reasons why I was so excited for the Broncos getting Dre Greenlaw in and getting Alex Singleton back, because on paper you should have two guys whose skill sets mesh very well together. I think they complement each other nicely, with Greenlaw being that guy who can, if knock on every surface you can find, can go sideline to sideline, can cover, can wreak havoc, and then Alex Singleton being that guy who can be more of, can be a little bit of a vacuum cleaner, can keep things from exacerbating, can make it, some of it's going to be drag tackling, but he does keep plays from getting worse. And I'm actually curious to see Alex Singleton behind what I think is going to be a defensive line at its peak, maybe a defensive line that's the best he's ever had in front of him, and what he looks like operating with hopefully not too many guards getting to the second level, being free to attack in a way that he hasn't been to this point in his career, and how effective he is. So optimistic about that, optimistic about what Dre Greenlaw can do if he's healthy, but we will see. To go back to Nick Bonito for a moment before we move on, he talked a little about his contract. Everything I hear is that it's progressing well. Doesn't seem like there's going to be any hiccups. It's not something. Let's put it this way: I don't think it's something that y'all need to be concerned about in terms of whether this is going to get done or not. I'd be shocked if it were not done in the coming weeks. And if you listen to Nick Bonito talk here, and I'm going to play one of his comments from his press conference on Tuesday, Nick Bonito does not sound terribly concerned either.
Yeah, man, I feel like they.
Oh, what is it? Why is it not clicking right anyway? Well, here's Nick Bonito.
Yeah, man, I feel like they pretty much like through the whole process like kept me like priority, knowing they want to extend me, they want me here. It's just about when they want to get it done and when we're ready. So.
And I like that he points out they've kept him a priority, even though, yeah, they got Courtland Sutton done. Yeah, they got Zach Allen done. But there wasn't a forgetting about Nick Bonito. It's almost like, if you look sort of how they did it, it was almost oldest first. Courtland Sutton heading into his 8th season, Zach Allen heading into his 7th season, Nick Bonito heading into his 4th season. Sort of a seniority thing working here, perhaps. If you were going to say, okay, what's a logical way to take these big three? If you had to kind of say, all right, we want to get all these guys done, but let's just cross them off the list. All right, we'll do the oldest guy first. We'll do the senior member first, and then we'll work our way down. But you can easily do that without worry when the first one gets done in July, very early in training camp. Another advantage of the Broncos going about business the way they do and getting these things done quickly, things that you don't have to worry about when you've got cash reservoirs, and you can make sure you've always got that money to put in escrow, that upfront money for all the guarantees. It's not a problem. There's nothing you have to move around. There's no issues. It's just done pretty quickly. And just the Broncos in general wanting to be one of those organizations that takes care of its own. One of the critiques, or not critiques, but criticisms and frustrations that players had toward the back half of the 2010s was that the Broncos, the reputation they had was that they tended to take care of free agents from the outside more than they took care of their own, and that didn't always settle very well. And now the reputation the Broncos are developing under current management is quite the opposite. It's starting to become a reputation more like that of the Green Bay Packers. And the Packers, one of the things that distinguishes them and I know I probably point to them maybe a little bit too much, but I think in a lot of ways the Packers for a long time have been a model organization. The Packers in the free agency era have always prioritized taking care of their own. And especially under the last couple of CBAs, making sure that the ones they want to take care of, they get done as soon as possible. The Packers were one of the first teams that really dove into trying to get those contracts done once they got into that fourth year of a rookie deal and starting to focus on doing them as when they wanted the player back, doing them as soon as they could before they got more expensive or the player got into that fourth year and maybe outplayed that, played beyond that and increased his value. Now, that value. All right. We have a mic here. Hold, please. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sorry about that. I think we had a sound issue. It said my mic was muted. Sorry about that. So anyway, eventually the Broncos are going to have a point in terms of when they re-sign a player. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. A little thing, I got a little notification said Mike was unplugged and I wasn't sure what happened. So I just wanted to make sure everything was copacetic. So anyhow, there will come a point where the Broncos re-sign a guy early and then something happens injury-wise. Now, it's going to be great for the player. The player's going to be like, man, I got my cash. But then the Broncos may feel not burned, but it might be something where the player gets injured and perhaps that player isn't back and doesn't end up living up to that contract, and maybe it ends up being they don't get value out of it. It's going to happen at some point. But in general, I think they're gonna feel pretty good about most of these deals. I'm gonna also kind of go back here a little bit to something that I was told back in late March, early April of 2023, back at the league meetings. Now, of course, spring of 2023 was when it was Sean Payton's first offseason, and we know that offseason was about a free agency splash. Broncos spent an awful lot of money. It was Ben Powers, it was Zach Allen, it was Mike McGlinchey, and then some other smaller signings as well. And that was in large part due to the lack of draft capital they had that year. Of course, they didn't have a first-round pick coming out of the Russell Wilson trade. And the thing I was told was this is not going to be a regular occurrence where the overwhelming bulk of what they would do in an off season was about importing in free agency. The intention long term was for the Broncos to be a draft and develop organization. And this was a top down intention. I'm talking like above George Payton, above Sean Payton. This was a desire from ownership to be an organization that focused on drafting and developing. That was something that Greg Penner believed was a best practice of successful organizations, not being willy-nilly in free agency, but having something sustainable. So when you see these re-signings of players that the Broncos have, and of course Zach Allen was a free agent they brought in, but now they're re-signing him, this all is a manifestation not only of successful drafting on George Payton's part, this is also a reflection of the vision that Greg Penner has for this organization and what he wants it to be. Penner did a lot of study of NFL organizations, of what worked and what didn't. And certainly one of the things that didn't work is, say, Daniel Snyder Washington. The old joke about Washington, how they could hang off-season champion banners year after year because they would, in most years, have a bunch of free agent signings and they would seem to win mid-March every year. But what were the results of that, right? Well, as I wrote in a column on the day that the Broncos ownership change was finalized, toward the end of that, I wrote, if all else fails, just do the opposite of what Dan Snyder did, and you'll be fine. So, anyway, an action figure. Oh my gosh. Oh, what the heck? What is going on? Oh my goodness. I don't even want to know. Oh, I don't even want to know what an action figure of Mace looks like. What is it, like me holding a microphone or something? There actually is a bobblehead of me that someone got. It's on my shelf. I'll have to show it. Someone had a bobblehead made of me and gave it to me as a gift. It's me actually in an Atlanta Braves uniform, so it's a little bit crazy. But anyway, so Denver football after dark here. I'm going to take a few questions here. How does Bo's training camp performance stack up against training camps of all starting quarterbacks from the 9 years prior? Oh man, that's a tough one, and I don't like comparing because training camp is about preparing for a season. It's not about like performance. I mean, if you want to talk about who was like the most accurate, if what's okay, or if we would say who had the best passer rating in a training camp of a starting quarterback, it would probably have been Case Keenum in 2018 because he didn't throw an interception. But Case Keenum also really wasn't kind of testing the limits of what he could do, what his receivers could do. And then you get to the opener of the regular season, and Case is trying to throw down the seam, and it's pick, and it's 3 picks. And then it's like, oh boy. Even though the Broncos won that game, you're like, I might have gotten a lemon here. Although that didn't particularly surprise me. There was actually, I'll actually tell you a story, and this is part of working on the inside for a team. I had a column. I had a series of columns when I was working for the Broncos team site back then, and I was ranking free agents. And I had Case Keenum below some other quarterbacks, including Teddy Bridgewater. Even though Teddy Bridgewater had not played the previous year and was coming off of injury, I leaned on that Teddy Bridgewater had been the starter before his injuries. And looking deeper at Case Keenum, looking deeper at some of the analytics, I thought Keenum, frankly, was fool's gold. And so I had Keenum a bit lower on my rankings initially than actually got out there publicly. And so I had the initial rankings, and then I got a phone call and was advised that I need to move Keenum up because our people, like football people, liked Case Keenum, and there was the possibility that Keenum could be signed, and if he was signed and there was something on the team site that reflected that he was ranked below a bunch of quarterbacks, how was that going to look? Like, oh boy, okay. But that, that's the sort of thing that happens on a team publication, on a team website. So, but yeah, I did not. I had an inkling that Keenum was going to be kind of a miss. Like, I thought. As I looked at his season, I'm like, there are some interception near misses here. There are some drop picks. It looked, like I said, the phrase I used was fool's gold. And then when they signed him, I remember going on Orange and Blue 760 with Ryan Edwards and Steve Atwater. We had our show, and I said, I'm fine with this if they draft a quarterback in round 1. I said Keenum is a perfectly fine bridge, not a solution. I don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. And we know what happened. They didn't draft a quarterback in round 1. They had Josh Allen at the Senior Bowl, and they coached him, and they didn't. But anyway, that's the past. So anyway, I like to that's like a little kind of inside baseball thing that kind of about what goes into having worked on the inside on team publications. And it's probably why I'm better working where I am doing what I'm doing now than being back on that side of things, because it's I don't know. I don't think I'm meant to be a caged bird. So anyway, I appreciate that, TG. Extremely interesting. Maybe I should just like put together like a, like the old advertisements you'd see in old newspapers way back in the day. Yeah, newspapers, old thing. I'm old school. And they'd have like the the ads for movies, and they'd have like quotes like 2 thumbs up, great. Like I should do like a thing for like this podcast. It just has all the quotes about about this show, what people think of it, and like splash it on there. And maybe do like an opposite thing that is like hate mail or something like that. This is terrible, blah blah blah. Just to go through it. Hit the like button. Yes, hit the like button if you haven't done so already. The likes help. The likes help. The engagements help. Oh, I guess I'm referring to the eye test for Bo in comparison to the others. I mean, the thing I'll say about Bo is on the eye test, he climbs the pocket. When he's been under duress, he hasn't looked flustered. The decisions are quick and crisp. He looks in command. Last year, early on, you could tell, you could kind of see the gears almost spinning in his head as he's trying to process things. And there's a lot being thrown at him. This year, the entire process looks smooth, even under pressure. And everything is smooth and quick and functional. So I would say that's a huge, huge difference for me. So not to go off topic, but how real was it that when Mike was coming back with Kirk in 2018? I feel pretty good that if Mike Shanahan had come back as the coach in 2018, that Kirk Cousins would have been the quarterback. I think the initial grand plan for Kirk Cousins would have been to go with Kyle Shanahan to San Francisco. But Jimmy Garoppolo did so well in the back half of 2017 after being traded to the 49ers that kind of forced them to ride with Jimmy G. Like, it was a good problem to have that Jimmy G played so well that year. It's like, okay, we found our guy. And so then for Kirk Cousins leaving Washington, it was sort of, okay, what's the alternative? I think if Mike Shanahan had become the Broncos coach in 2018, I do believe Kirk Cousins would have almost certainly been the quarterback. It would have been a Mike Shanahan, Kirk Cousins reunion from their time in Washington. And it's fascinating to think what would have happened. I believe somewhere in the YouTube ether, there is a Cecil... There's a show Cecil Lammey and I did where there's a what if Mike Shanahan had become the Broncos coach in 2018. And it did involve, part of the what if was Kirk Cousins being the Broncos quarterback. And it's fascinating to think of that because I do think the Broncos would have won some games. I put it this way. They would not have had the run of losing seasons. Of course, they had 7 consecutive losing seasons from 2017 through 2023. And they missed the playoffs for 8 consecutive years. If Mike Shanahan had been hired in 2018 after the 2017 season, if Mike Shanahan had been hired and Kirk Cousins had become the quarterback, those streaks would not have happened. I believe they would have ended probably by 2019. You would have seen the Broncos at least a wild card team back in the playoffs. But I don't think the Broncos would have won big. I don't think they would have been a Super Bowl team. I'm not even sure they even would have won a division. Not with the Colossus east on I-70 in Kansas City. And that's an interesting thing to think about, that they would have been better, but I don't know if they would have gotten past 10 or 11 wins. Like, it would have been better, but there would have been a ceiling on it that would have probably, in the end, disappointed everybody. And then what would the reaction have been? Like, I don't think it would have resulted in a Super Bowl. I'm not even sure. Like I said, I don't even think it would have resulted in a division title or a home playoff game. I think the ceiling would have been wild card. And then what? How does everyone feel about that? So that's something to think about if that had happened. Didn't Denver try to get Cousins? I mean, I think there were in the real timeline there was a little bit of interest, but Cousins was kind of zeroed in on Minnesota. Like that was kind of missile lock from the get-go, and the Broncos went in on Case Keenum, or as John Elway called him at the press conference, Keesum. And again, I think Case Keenum with, say, Josh Allen, I think probably would have made sense and then I think it would have actually been even good for Josh Allen. It would have I don't think they would have forced Josh Allen out there. I think maybe you would have seen Josh Allen come in the back half of 2018, maybe by maybe it wouldn't have happened until like week 14 or week 15 or so. But then the interesting thing would have been he would have probably had a coaching change. Now, my alternate history on that, if the Broncos had drafted Josh Allen with Case Keenum, their coaching hire in 2019 would have been tailored to Josh Allen, pun intended, because I believe their hire would have been Zach Taylor. They did interview Zach Taylor, of course, as part of it. And I believe that if Zach Taylor had offers from the Broncos and Bengals in front of him, he would have taken the Broncos. Remember, the Bengals didn't have Joe Burrow. That was still 1 year off. So I think all things being equal in that moment, Zach Taylor would have chosen the Broncos offer, and he would have been the next Bronco coach because the coaching hire in 2019 would have been tailored around a coach to guide Josh Allen. And then Josh Allen having, as we see, some excellent natural tools. If the Broncos had drafted Josh Allen in 2018 and he'd backed up Case Keenum and then come in late in the season, but it hadn't worked out for Vance Joseph and they dismissed Vance Joseph and they hired Zach Taylor, Zach Taylor might still be your Broncos coach and Josh Allen might be your quarterback. And I mean, it's changed everything. Like literally every player on the Bronco roster might be different except for like Garrett Bowles. That Garrett Bowles, and maybe they still draft Cortland Sutton. Like that is literally how much would have changed out of that. It's wild, like the butterfly effect of things. And it changes like the entire NFL because players are in different spots. I mean, you know, it's just wild it's wild to think about that. Hey, Cornbread. Hey, love hearing from you down in the Bayou. I'm guessing maybe you'll be at Saturday's game down in the Superdome. Hope so. If you're from Bayou Country, Louisiana. So anyway, so good to hear from you all on this Wednesday morning here. Talking to you from the Mile High City, New York, New Jersey, tuning in. Man, so you're 3:04 in the morning, truly the wee small hours of the morning there back east. So love hearing from you. Love the fact that you're up at this hour, this ridiculous hour, watching this show. But yeah, I love kind of those what ifs are really kind of fascinating to me sometimes. Elway drafting Chubb over Allen. The thing that I still can't get out of my mind, and I think about this a lot, is when they got done with the draft and they met the media, and John Elway said that they did all these mock drafts, and every time they did a mock draft that Bradley Chubb didn't slip to 5, and I thought, then man, I don't know what kind of groupthink was going on in there, but I saw a lot of mock drafts on the outside that had Bradley Chubb slipping to 5. I don't know what was going on when they did the mock drafts in their room, when they did it over and over, but something was amiss if none of them once had Bradley Chubb slipping to 5. So, how much do I think Frank Crum has improved? There's been some improvement. I think definitely more polish to his game, fewer mistakes. He's probably right on the roster bubble right now. But that being said, he's tackle 5 because he's behind Alex Palczewski and he's behind Matt Parrott. And is there room for 5 tackles? I mean, they did keep him on the 53 last year. Do they feel strongly about him this year the way they felt about him last year? That's the question right now, I think, regarding Frank Crum and whether he's on the 53 or not. And some of that's going to be kind of gauging where they feel his development is. So I think Frank Crum is definitely improved. He's actually, to me, improved in the last couple of weeks. Like early in camp, I thought still raw, but I've seen progress from him. So definitely a bubble player right now. Boy, Frank Crum is a classic example also of a guy that where I wish there was still NFL Europe, because the thing that Frank probably needs more than anything is game reps, full speed reps. Frank Crum could use a minor league. The Broncos to have like a Colorado Springs Broncos to go play like a 5 to 10 game schedule so he could get some real good, solid reps to play and grow. That's what he needs. I still say that is the thing I wish the league would do. Nick Gargiulo, the South Carolina guard, hurt. ACL injury, out for the year. So, do I remember asking Melvin Gordon the ball security question? Oh, I remember that well. Vegas game. Sadly, yeah. It was one question too many, and he broke down. It was all cool. We talked the next day. It was just like, it was one question too many for him, and it was nothing personal. But I did feel bad about bringing tears to his eyes. But it also told you how much Melvin Gordon put into it, and that it's these guys. They just because they may seem kind of cool on the surface, man, it means a lot to them. It does. It means the world to these guys. And I always say, like, remember when these guys are dealing with cuts next week, and if you're on social media commenting, and try to, and I even say this anytime, just try to have, when you talk about these guys on social media, try to have some compassion. They're humans, and these are your lives are talking about. What happens if Ingram has to miss time? Ooh, well, this is where you say they don't really have a comparable answer. I mean, the closest thing they have in terms of the pass catching tight end is Lucas Kroll, who has had a nice camp. And the best thing I can say for Lucas Kroll was his good camp has allowed him to play his way onto the bubble, which I don't think he was on the bubble at the start of training camp, but I think he's squarely there now. He's given himself a shot. He's made some nice catches in practice. Another guy who's had a good camp. There are guys, I think of guys like Lucas Kroll. I think of guys like Jordan Jackson, Eni Uwazurike. Lucas Kroll, his job is in danger because of Evan Ingram. Jackson and Uwazurike, they're threatened because of Savion Jones. So you bring in new guys that threaten to push some of these players off the roster. And what you see from these players on the roster, they're all saying, like, not so fast. If you're taking my job, you're not taking this thing easy. I'm not letting you have this spot easy. I'm not letting you kick me off without a fight. And that's actually one of the things I've loved seeing from some of these guys who effectively, maybe were replaced. I mean, even like a guy like Lavelle Bailey, he's had a great camp, and yet you bring in Dre Greenlaw, and you bring back Justin Sternad, and certainly Lavelle Bailey becomes a guy who's endangered and very much on the bubble, and Bailey's had a terrific camp. So, like, all these guys that you would say, okay, maybe you brought in somebody better. Or you look at the running backs. I mean, you look at, they bring in R.J. Harvey, and they bring in J.K. Dobbins. So what would that mean for, Joel McLaughlin? And what would that mean for Tyler Bidet? I mean, even Audric Estime's had some fight in practice as well. I mean, it didn't go well. It wasn't a distinguished game for him on Saturday. But, I mean, he's shown some force in practice. Blake Watson, you see the spark that he's had. Jaleel McLaughlin, I mean, times he's running like a bat out of you-know-what. I mean, so that's one of the things that I really liked is how much fight we have seen from guys that were pushed either onto the bubble or even beyond by new players coming in. These guys responding to the pressure. So that's exciting. Too bad the offseason, the NFL TV games don't have the ratings like Great Rookie Development League. Well, like the the UFL, it's kind of it's because it's not with the NFL. It's its own entity. In the NFL Europe, the league, they felt like they were flushing money down the toilet, and then they changed their European marketing strategy to, of course, having actual NFL games in Europe. Basically, what happened was the NFL realized that the European audience, when it was getting actual NFL games on television, the European audience was like, okay, we know what good NFL football looks like because we're seeing it on TV every Sunday and Monday in the regular season. And with all due respect to NFL Europa, this isn't it. And the other thing is that the NFL teams weren't really allocating a lot of good players over there because they wanted their prospects to be in their OTAs. So unfortunately, it wasn't being used properly. There was a time in the late 90s it was, especially with the quarterback position, and you saw Jake Delhomme, Kurt Warner, Brad Johnson, that succeeded after getting playing time over there. And there was a moment where NFL Europe became this back door to developing quarterback talent. And it looked like this league had a future. And then it was even a backdoor developing small offensive line talent as well. And then teams started going away from that, unfortunately, and that was a shame. So if a minor league ever happens, it would be something domestic, and it would be highly connected to teams at their facilities to kind of consolidate things. I've always thought that like a perfect idea would be teams effectively having rosters of about 100 to 110 with like 55 on the primary and then 55 in the minor league and kind of going back and forth. And actually that minor league even playing concurrently in the fall along with the major league, and the games being like on Wednesdays or something like that. I mean, I guess, we wouldn't have maybe Maction anymore. We would have, NFLB on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights, Colorado Springs Broncos against the Reno Raiders. I'd watch that. Would you? Anyway, do I see Chris Abrams-Draine as a future starter? Potentially. Is it going to be? Here is the question. There may not be room at the inn, given where that is. Does Devon Vele get cut? No. He's not getting cut. If he's not here, I imagine it would be a trade, but I would be absolutely flabbergasted if Devon Vele got cut. He has too much value to be cut. He had too good of a season last year to be cut. I think the ratings would be surprisingly good. Yeah, I'd watch. I think a lot of people would watch. I don't see the Broncos keeping 6 wide receivers. I do. Well, all due respect, Nate. I do, and I think. I mean, Sean Payton has talked about activating 6 receivers on game day, not just keeping 6 receivers on the 53, activating 6 receivers. So, I get your skepticism, Nate, but I think they're keeping 6 receivers here on this. All due respect, Nate. I think that you're probably wrong on that take. So anyway, do they trade Damari? Possibly, if they can find value for him. I think they'll try. I don't see room for him on the roster right now, and the only thing is, he's going into the last year of his rookie deal. I don't know that he has much value at this point. So if they could get, I think the value for Damari Mathis is probably Damari in a 7th round pick for a 6th round pick. So the classic George Payton deal where you turn a 7th into a 6th. That's the sort of thing that maybe you could end up getting. So with 6 wide receivers, does that mean 2 quarterbacks? No, I think they can get that spot from elsewhere. I could see them keeping 8 offensive linemen and then building the reserve offensive line from the practice squad. Because you could probably get Calvin Throckmorton to the practice squad. Nick Gargiulo obviously is no longer in the mix, unfortunately, because of his injury. But you might be able to build your reserve offensive line in part from the practice squad. Do you think about maybe keeping Frank Crum out on the practice squad as well? Is it Clay Webb or another interior offensive lineman on the practice squad as well? I think Alex Forsyth's on the 53. So I think you may be able to go 8 offensive linemen, 6 wide receivers, 3 quarterbacks, 4 running backs. Another thing also to consider is you may not see a fullback on the initial 53. You might see Michael Burton and Adam Prentice both on the practice squad, especially if Burton is dealing with a hamstring injury. Prentice, they may have them both on the practice squad, and then if Burton's still recovering from the hammy injury, they use elevations on Prentice until Burton's ready, and then Burton gets the elevations. I mean, there's all these games that they might play. Surprise release, who'd it be? I'm not sure it'd be a surprise, but I could see PJ Locke, especially because the Broncos would save $4 million of cap space if they move on from him. So I think that's one to keep an eye on. It'd be tough. I mean, he's done all he can recovering from spinal fusion surgery, but special teams are going to play a huge role in determining backup safeties, and there may just be other guys at this point who have better special teams capability. I mean, someone like J.L. Skinner is a terrific special teamer at this point. So that's something that may come into play. So anyway, nobody in this chat played football. Well, thanks for the all caps there, TG. Yep. What does that mean? Broncos fans are no. Tough division. Oh, we got ourselves a troll. How about that? Welcome. We got ourselves a troll. How about, hey, welcome, TG. We welcome all the trolls. Just, if you start cussing at people, that's when we're going to have, and start harassing people, that's when we're going to have a problem. But, if you're just harmless like that, we'll live with you. Nick, I know the last episode dove in the specifics of this, but I'm not sure if you came to consensus. If you think they're going to keep or cut the developmental tight end we drafted. Okay. And by the way, Braxton, you're right. You've made it when a troll shows up. That's true. All right. So, Nick, I want to get into this. I got a soundbite because I had a follow-up question on Caleb Lohner because Sean Payton was talking about penalties. He was talking about penalties for the pre-snap. Of course, there were 7 pre-snap penalties. One of them was offset. And multiple pre-snap penalties on Caleb Lohner. And so I did bring that up. And just very simply, I asked Sean, okay, you think that's a function of just him being so inexperienced at playing football because he didn't really have a lot of extensive football experience until last year at Utah. And even then, you could count his snaps in double digits. Here's Sean's response to my question.
I would say a little bit.
Oops.
I would say a little bit, but we got to get going. We got to get going. But I would say a little bit, just overall as football knowledge.
There's a lot in there. We got to get going. That was a loaded comment there. We got to get going. We're sitting here. He makes that comment on Tuesday. It's a week to the 53-player deadline. And that's one where I kind of heard that and I thought, yeah, like I think you're right, Cornbread. That sounded like a, dude, you got to get in gear. Like, we're not going to, the train might leave the station without you. I think there's only room but for so many developmental players on a 53. And I think that's another thing to consider as well. Like last year there were basically 2 developmental players that weren't in the mix immediately, but they got kept. Actually, I'd say 3, because Chris Abrams-Drain wasn't playing right away, and George Payton has talked about this. Abrams-Drain was behind other players. So there were 3 really developmental players on that initial 53. Chris Abrams-Drain, Frank Crum, Blake Watson. And they all stayed. How many developmental players are there room for right now? See, Q Robinson, while he's developing as an edge, he's probably going to be a core 4 special teamer. So he's not really developmental in nature. But you've got a team that it's in a different spot than it was last year. I mean, they had some hopes and they had some goals, and they were kind of thinking young and hungry can be dangerous. I think they had a belief that they could surprise some people. But now you have expectations. Nobody was saying Super Bowl in meetings last year. This year, Sean Payton's saying Super Bowl in meetings. So that's a different mindset. How many developmental players are you going to have on the 53? Guys where you're saying, okay, this player, he's not among the best 53, but we think we can bring him along. How many are there? And who are they? I guess I'll just throw a couple of names out here. If you're choosing between Caleb Lohner and Joaquin Davis, who do you pick? I think that's a thought. Who's ahead? Joaquin Davis, saw it a couple of times today. When he just reaches his hands out, and it's it doesn't matter what his reach is. He's got this insane catch radius, and the ball just sticks. It's no offense to Caleb Lohner, but if you told me, all right, you got one spot for a developmental guy, would it be Davis or Lohner? I'd probably go with Davis. That's just, again, your mileage may vary. That would probably be the guy I'd go with. There's something there with him. There's this exceptional athleticism with him. You can't, those kind, the sticky hands, the vertical, the stride. He's even coming along as a blocker, the 4.36. I've seen him beat Pat Surtain in a one-on-one drill. A guy who's that raw is not supposed to beat the DPOY for a play, but I've seen him do it. So I think that's probably why I'd say that. Is there a way they get Courtney Jackson and Joaquin Davis to the practice squad? Well, I'll just throw the I'll just throw the graphic here that I used last night. Positions, percentage of players at each position claimed off waivers here. Let me move the, sorry, I'll move the comment here off that so you can see it. And you see 9.3% of kickers who were waived in the last 9 cycles at the deadline were claimed. Wide receiver and tight end are third from the bottom and second to the bottom. So this will be the sort of thing that tells you, okay, maybe you do roll the dice on Joaquin Davis, on Courtney Jackson. I'd say if you put both of them on waivers, at least one would slip through. Just kind of that's kind of my take on it. But another thing to consider on Caleb Lohner is drafted players who hit the waiver wire, and you see there the last 3 years it's 9 out of 59. So so you're actually talking about a considerably higher percentage of players who are in that year's draft class who, when they're waived, that get claimed than the norm. So that is something to consider as well here. A few more. Courtney Jackson, a developmental piece or a long shot? I think he's in the mix for the 53. And I think the other thing on Courtney Jackson is if you want to save some reps for Marvin Mims Jr., if you want to have him be more of an offensive guy, Courtney Jackson is somebody who is effectively your number 2 returner. So, Derek Baird, Derek, man, you're too kind. You're too kind. You don't have to do that, man. I appreciate it, though. But thank you. Is there any position you might see the Broncos go shopping for after cuts? I'd keep an eye on inside linebacker. I know people mentioned tight end. Some people maybe mentioned tight end as well, so I can't rule that one out either, depending on who's on the market. It was a deep tight end class in the draft. And so if maybe someone gets cut who trips their trigger that they liked in the draft, perhaps the Broncos bite there. That's something they may consider. But I think the most likely one, Derek, is inside linebacker. And that's also where, if you think about a player-for-player trade, if you trade, let's say you traded from the surplus at wide receiver and you traded Devon Vele, could Devon Vele net you a high-quality inside linebacker to really help your depth there? Would you think about that? Is that something that comes into play? I mean, I guess that's the sort of thing that maybe you'd consider if it came up. Because inside linebacker is still a position where I think you do maybe have a little concern about the depth there, I think. So, but I appreciate that. Oh boy. I see the troll. I see the troll, but I'm not doing it. Been a recurring issue with the inside linebacker. Well, yeah, and when you saw Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw go down and practice early in camp, it's like, man, it's always one position that gets hit. It's always, every year, most years, it's always one position that gets struck by injury more than others. Always. Always is. And you just hope it doesn't persist with inside linebacker. But that's sort of the way it is. Surprise keep. Jordan Turner. And that's actually where, if you talk about an inside linebacker who's flashing, Jordan Turner had a whale of a game on Saturday night. Probably the star of the second half for me was Jordan Turner. Ubiquitous everywhere. So right now, I did a 53 player projection on Monday. I think I'm gonna do a 2.0 on Friday or Saturday night after the game, just for fun. What the heck? I'll do a revised version, and then we'll see if my initial version was more accurate than my revised version. But I think on my revised version, I'm gonna have Jordan Turner because when I went back and did when I did a rewatch on it, I was impressed the first time. I was even more impressed on the rewatch. And here's the thing, I've said this many times. There's always somebody who flashes in the games where it's not necessarily as evident in practice. They get a little bit lost in the backwash, but then the lights go on and go to full speed, and it's there. And Jordan Turner is that guy, and that's who you're talking about. Hearing anything about the Titans, about as ideal as an opening game as they come. Yes, right down to the fact that you're going to face a rookie, number one overall quarterback on the road. And the history of number one overall picks at quarterback on the road in week one for those teams is poor. In the common draft era, teams to start a number one overall pick at QB in week one on the road, they've won once. And it was John Elway, Broncos, 1983, and he got benched in that game. It's a bad situation. They're going to come into Denver against what's expected to be a very good defense in a hostile environment. The Broncos should win that game, and they should win it comfortably. And they should make things rough on young Cam Ward. You ought to be disappointed if they don't. Cam Ward's going to have some good games, and he's going to look very good, and he's going to have some dazzling moments this year, I believe. But I don't believe they're going to be in week one. And if they are, we're going to have to talk. Traveling to Europe for the Jets game. That's the plan. So, anyway. All right. It's 1:32 in the morning in the Mountain Time Zone. Broncos have practice. I'll be out there in about 9 hours or so watching the Broncos in their Wednesday work. We will not hear from Sean Payton on Wednesday. We will hear from Joe Lombardi, Vance Joseph, and Darren Rizzi. It's coordinator day. I often find coordinator day to be the most interesting of the week. Get a little bit of insight on specifics on each side of the ball and on special teams. I'm looking forward to hearing. Looking forward to hearing from Vance Joseph as well. I may ask him about Jordan Turner as well and how he's come along so far. So we'll get some insight on that. We'll watch the Broncos at work on Wednesday morning. So appreciate you joining me here for this edition of Denver Football After Dark on Wednesday morning. It's been a pleasure chatting with you all. Pleasure having you with me, whether you watched live or on delay. I don't care when you watch. I'm just grateful that you take a little bit of time to join me on this in my little test kitchen. Like, comment, share, subscribe, of course. And if you know some people in Broncos country or elsewhere who might like this sort of show, this sort of conversation, hey, tell them about this channel and clue them in, and hopefully they'll join the conversation. I appreciate comments as long as they're civil and lively and intelligent, and we'll try to keep it civil in the comment space as well. I just want to keep that comment space kind of clean and normal and rational, and not let it get like some other spaces of the internet. So anyway, thanks for joining me here for this edition of Denver Football After Dark on this Wednesday morning, and hope you have a great Wednesday. I'll be back to talk all things Broncos here on Wednesday night once I get back from Coors Field and watching Shohei Ohtani pitch for the Dodgers against the Rockies. So until next time, take care. Thanks for watching, and enjoy your Wednesday, everybody.